The holographic room was completely silent. The air felt heavy. In the center of the room, a three-dimensional battle played out. Giant, humanoid machines made of polished metal moved through a ruined city. These were the Coalition's best war mechs. Their weapons glowed with powerful energy. Then, the enemy appeared. It was not a machine. It was not a creature anyone could easily describe. It looked like a pool of liquid mercury, but it moved on its own. It was a shimmering, silvery shape that could change form. The Galactic Coalition called it a Gravemurph. The war mechs saw it. They opened fire. Bright blue bolts of plasma shot from their rifles. The shots hit the Gravemurph and passed straight through it, smashing into the buildings behind. The creature did not seem to feel a thing. It flowed forward. One mech switched to a laser. A thin red beam cut the air. It went right through the Gravemurph's head. The creature kept coming. Another mech fired a missile. It exploded right on the Gravemurph's chest. Fire and smoke covered it for a second. When the smoke cleared, the silvery shape was untouched, still moving. The Gravemurph reached the first mech. It did not punch or claw. It simply flowed up the machine's leg like water. Where the silver substance touched the metal, the mech's armor dissolved. Sparks flew. The mech fell apart, collapsing into a pile of useless parts. The Gravemurph moved to the next one. In less than a minute, the entire squad of advanced mechs was destroyed. The hologram froze, showing the Gravemurph standing alone among the wreckage. The lights in the room came on. Standing before the group of cadets was Trainer Kale. He was a Viscar. He was tall, with hard chitinous plates covering his body like a natural armor. His face was long, with dark, compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "Cadets," his voice clicked, sharp and clear. "You have just witnessed the primary tactical threat in this sector. The Gravemurph." He walked slowly in front of them. The cadets were from many different species. Some had fur, some had scales, some had smooth skin. Among them were the human cadets, Jin, Myra, Hana, and Sue. They all wore the same gray and blue cadet uniforms. "No energy-based weapon can harm it," Kale stated. "Plasma, laser, particle beam, they are all useless. The creature can phase its molecular structure. The energy passes through it." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Kinetic weapons, bullets, shells, missiles are equally ineffective. As you saw, the explosion does nothing. Even a solid projectile, when it reaches the creature, will find nothing solid to hit. It will phase through." A large reptilian cadet raised a hand. "Trainer, how do we fight it?" Kale's mandibles twitched. "We do not. That is the first and most important lesson. Engaging a Gravemurph in combat is suicide. Your only objective is survival. If you encounter one, you will activate your multi-frequency damping field beacon. This will confuse its senses for a short time. You will then retreat and call for an immediate evacuation. That is the doctrine. It is the only way." The cadets nodded. It made sense. If you cannot hurt your enemy, you must run. But one cadet was not nodding. His name was Jin. He was a human male with dark hair and calm eyes. While the others watched the final, frozen image of the Gravemurph, Jin was looking at his own small datapad. He had been recording the battle. He zoomed in on one part of the fight. It was just a second before the second mech was destroyed. The mech's shoulder-mounted rotary cannon, firing solid rounds, had spun to life as the Gravemurph approached. Most of the bullets phased through the creature's form. But one bullet, just one, seemed to hit something solid right in the center of its chest. For a fraction of a second, the Gravemurph's silvery surface contracted. It was a tiny flinch, so fast you would miss it if you blinked, but Jin did not blink. He saw it later in the common area. The cadets were talking. "The mood was serious, so we just run?" said Sue, a strong human cadet who loved heavy weapons. "We can't even try to fight?" "The trainer said it's impossible," said Hannah, who was smart with technology. "Our best weapons are useless." Myra sat next to Jin. She was agile and quick. She noticed Jin was quiet. "What are you thinking about?" she asked him. Jin showed her his datapad. He played the short clip, slowing it down. Look, he said, pointing. Right there. Myra leaned in and watched. She saw the Gravemurph's tiny, almost invisible flinch. What was that? She asked. It flinched, Jin said simply. But it was just one bullet. The rest did nothing. The mech still died. I know, Jin replied. But it reacted. It felt something. Trainer Kale said no weapon can halt it. But he didn't say that nothing can. Myra looked at him, her expression worried. Jin, that's just a guess. Trainer Kale has all the data. He knows what he's talking about. Jin did not argue. He just kept looking at the clip. In his mind, he was not seeing energy beams and explosions. He was seeing that one small physical reaction. It was a clue everyone else had ignored. That night, while the other cadets slept, Jin was awake in the workshop. He had permission to be there. He was good with machines. On a large screen, he had diagrams of coalition weapons. They were all complex, focusing on delivering different types of energy. On a smaller screen, he had a simple diagram of his own. It was a basic magnetic rail. The principle was old, even for humans. Use electromagnets to push a solid metal rod down a track faster than the eye can see. It was not a fancy energy weapon. It was a slingshot. A very, very powerful slingshot. He started sketching. His design was crude and bulky. It would not be a rifle you could carry easily. It would be heavy. It might only fire once before it broke. But if his guess was right, once was all you would need. He knew the galaxy had forgotten about simple things. They looked for complex solutions. They tried to outsmart the Gravemurph. Jin was thinking about something else. He was thinking about hitting it. The next day, Trainer Kale took them to the firing range. He showed them the standard-issue plasma rifle. He demonstrated how to fire it, how to cool it, how to recharge its power cell. These are your primary weapons, he said. They are effective against all known armored and organic targets. One of the cadets, a willowy being from a low-gravity world, asked, Trainer, what about the Gravemurph? Kale's expression was stern. As I said, Cadet, it is ineffective, but you will still carry it for other threats. He looked at the group. The doctrine is your shield. Your knowledge is your weapon. Remember that. Do not waste your time on impossible ideas. Jin listened. He took his plasma rifle when it was his turn. He fired it at the target dummy. The plasma bolt hit the dummy's chest and burned a hole straight through it. It was a powerful weapon, but Jin was not thinking about plasma. He was thinking about the weight of a solid piece of metal. He was thinking about speed and force. He was thinking about the loud, simple crack of an impact dot as they left the range. Myra walked beside him. You're still thinking about your idea, aren't you? She said quietly. Jin nodded. They are trying to use a key on a lock that has no keyhole, he said. I am thinking about using a hammer. That sounds very human, Myra said with a small smile. Jin looked at her. Maybe it is. He knew he could not build his weapon here. Not at the academy. But he filed the designs away in his datapad. He remembered the tiny flinch on the screen. It was a small thing, but sometimes small things held big truths. The galaxy had given up on fighting the Gravemurph. They had accepted defeat. Jin, a simple human cadet, had not. The trainer had said no weapon could halt it. In the quiet of his mind, Jin was already loading one anyway. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Xylos. Inside, the cadets sat in rows, checking their gear. Jin fastened the straps of his pack, his movements slow and deliberate. Next to him, Myra checked the power cell on her plasma rifle for the third time. Still thinking about your hammer? She asked, her voice low. Jin gave a small nod. A good tool is simple. It does one job well. Before Myra could answer, Trainer Kale stood at the front of the compartment. The ship's lights glinted off his chitinous plates. Listen carefully, Kale's voice clicked through the cabin. Your mission is simple. Survey Sector 7. Map the terrain, record mineral readings, and return to the extraction point in 48 hours. This is a routine exercise. He paused, his dark eyes moving across their faces. The damping beacon is now active on your command wristbands. If your sensors pick up a gravemorph signature, you activate it immediately. You do not engage. You retreat and call for evacuation. Is that understood? A chorus of yes, trainer, echoed through the cabin. The ship landed with a soft thud. The ramp lowered, revealing a jungle so green it hurt the eyes. Giant leaves, broad as tabletops, filtered the sunlight into shifting patterns. The air was thick and humid, filled with the buzz of unseen insects. The team moved out. Sue took point, his heavy plasma cannon looking almost small in his large hands. Hannah followed, her eyes glued to the sensor pad in her hand. Myra and Jin brought up the rear. For hours, they followed their orders. Hannah scanned the mineral deposits and strange plant life. Sue marked their path with electronic beacons. The jungle was quiet, too quiet. There were no animal calls, no rustling in the undergrowth. It was a world holding its breath. During a short break, Jin crouched by a rocky outcrop. He ran his glove over the dark gray stone. He pulled out his own, smaller scanner and took a reading. Myra knelt beside him. "What is it?" "High iron content," Jin said quietly. "And traces of tungsten." "Very dense, very hard." Her eyes narrowed in understanding. "For your hammer." "Every tool needs the right material," he said simply. He didn't say anything more. He just marked the location on his private map. They made camp as the planet's twin suns began to set. The shadows grew long and twisted. Hannah set up a perimeter sensor net. Sue prepared the rations. Jin volunteered for the first watch. As the others slept in their small tents, Jin sat by the dim glow of the camp heater. He listened to the silence. It was different from the silence of space. The silence felt watchful. A soft rustle made him turn. Myra slipped out of her tent and sat beside him. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Hannah's sensors picked up something an hour ago," she whispered. "A spatial distortion. It was faint, and it disappeared." She didn't want to alarm everyone. Jin looked out into the dark jungle. "The trainer said they phase through matter. They must distort space when they do it." "You think it's here?" Myra's voice was tense. "I think it's nearby," Jin said. "I think it's watching us, learning our patterns." Myra shivered. "We should wake the others. Activate the beacon now." "And say what?" Jin asked. "That we have a feeling?" "The trainer would call it back. We would fail the exercise. They would say humans panic too easily." He looked at her, his face serious in the faint light. "We need proof, one way or another." Myra stared at him. "You're going to try to build it, aren't you?" "Here, I marked the ore deposit this afternoon. It's not far. And I saw something else on the march." He pulled up a map on his datapad. A broken-down logistics rover. "The Coalition must have left it behind on a previous survey. It has a power core and magnetized coils for its cargo lift." "That's stealing Academy property," Myra hissed. "It's using available resources for survival," Jin corrected her softly. "The doctrine allows for that." He stood up. "I'm going now. The night will cover me. Keep watch here." Myra stood too, her jaw set. "This is crazy, Jin." "Staying here without a way to fight is also crazy," he said. He shouldered his pack, which now held his engineering toolkit. "I will be back before dawn." Before she could argue further, he melted into the shadows between the giant trees. The jungle at night was a different world. Strange fungi glowed with pale light. Jin moved as quietly as he could, using his datapad's map to guide him. His heart hammered in his chest. Every shadow seemed to move. He found the rover exactly where he had seen it. It was an old model, half swallowed by creeping vines. The cockpit was empty. He used his laser cutter to open the side panel, exposing the engine and the cargo lift mechanism. There it was, the magnetic guidance system for the lift. He carefully disconnected the thick coils of wire. He took the small but powerful power cell from the rover's auxiliary system. It was against regulations, but he tried not to think about that. Next, he went to the rocky outcrop. Using a sonic pick from his kit, he broke off chunks of the dark ore. It was heavy, even in the low gravity. He found a few veins of the denser tungsten. It was perfect. He carried his stolen and gathered materials to a small cave he had spotted earlier. It was dry and hidden from view. There, under the light of a single glow stick, he began to build. The design in his head was simple. a stock to brace against his shoulder. A long, thick barrel made from a hollowed-out support struck from the rover. The magnetic coils would be wrapped around it. The power cell would feed a massive, one-time surge of electricity through the coils. At the front, a chamber to hold the projectile. He used the rover's automated forge tool to melt the iron and tungsten ore. He poured the molten metal into a mold he carved from a fireproof stone. He was making a slug. A simple, solid, heavy piece of metal, no explosives. No energy core, just weight and density. As he worked, his hands moved with a calm certainty. This was not advanced technology. This was basic physics, the kind humans had understood for centuries. Cause and effect. Action and reaction. He thought about the other cadets sleeping in their camp. He thought about Trainer Kale's absolute certainty. He thought about the grave morph on the hologram. Flowing through energy blasts without a care, he finished the weapon just as the sky began to lighten. It was ugly. It was heavy, almost too heavy to carry. The wires were exposed in places. The barrel was crude and unpolished. It looked like a piece of junk. But when he loaded the heavy, custom-made slug into the chamber, it felt right. It felt solid. It felt real. He hid the weapon under a tarp at the back of the cave and hurried back to camp. He slipped back into the camp just as the first sun was rising. Myra was still on watch, her eyes wide. "You're back?" she breathed in relief. Jin nodded, sitting down heavily. He was exhausted. "Did you?" She trailed off. "I built it," he said quietly. "It's in a cave about 500 meters from here." Before she could respond, Hana emerged from her tent, looking worried. She held up her sensor pad. "The distortion is back," she said. "Stronger this time and closer." Sue came out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" "We might have a problem," Hana said, her voice tight. "The reading is, it's moving, it's circling us." The four of them stood in the cool morning air, looking out at the jungle. It was just as green, just as quiet as the day before. But now, the silence felt like a threat. Jin looked at his friends. He looked at their standard-issue plasma rifles. He thought of the crude, heavy weapon hidden in the cave. The trainer's words echoed in his mind. No weapon can halt it. Your only option is to run. But Jin had loaded one anyway. And now, he had a feeling they were going to need it. The air in the camp grew cold. The morning light seemed to dim. Hana's hands trembled as she held the sensor pad. The distortion. "It's not circling anymore," she whispered. Her face was pale. "It's coming straight for us." Sue immediately hefted his heavy plasma cannon. The weapon hummed to life, its power core glowing a soft blue. "Where?" He barked, his voice tight with fear. 50 meters. "Due east," Hana said, pointing a shaky finger towards a dense thicket of giant purple ferns. Myra had her plasma rifle ready. Her eyes were wide, but her hands were steady. She looked at Jin. He wasn't looking at the ferns. He was looking back in the direction of the cave where his weapon was hidden. It was too far. There was no time. "Activate the beacon," Myra shouted. Jin snapped out of his thoughts. He pressed the button on his wristband. A small disc-shaped device on his belt lit up, projecting a shimmering invisible field around them. The others did the same. The 4 overlapping fields created a buzzing sound in the air. This was the doctrine. This was their only defense. For a long moment, nothing happened. The jungle was silent. Then the purple ferns directly in front of them began to wither. Their vibrant color turned gray and ashen. They crumbled to dust without a sound. From behind the dissolving plants, the gravemurph appeared. It was more terrifying in real life than in the hologram. It was a pool of living mercury, taller than a person. It had no eyes, no mouth, no face. Its surface shimmered and flowed, reflecting the jungle in a twisted funhouse mirror. It moved without walking, gliding over the ground and leaving a trail of dead vegetation in its wake. It stopped at the edge of their damping field. The creature seemed to study the invisible barrier. It extended a silvery tendril towards it. The air where the tendril touched the field crackled with energy. The gravemurph pulled back, its form rippling. "It's working," Sue said, a note of relief in his voice. "The field is holding it back." "We need to move," Jin said calmly. Back to the extraction point now? They began to back away, keeping their damping beacons pointed towards the creature. The grave Murph did not follow. It simply watched them, a silent, shimmering sentinel, then it moved again. Instead of trying to push through the field, it sank into the ground. The solid earth beneath it became like water, and the creature vanished from sight. Where did it go? Hannah cried out, frantically scanning her sensors. I've lost it. A moment later, the ground 10 meters behind them, right in the middle of their escape path, bubbled and churned. The grave Murph rose up from the dirt as effortlessly as it had entered it. It had phased straight through the planet itself. It was now between them and safety. Their damping fields were still active, but the creature was inside their perimeter. The doctrine had failed. It's learning, Myra yelled. Panic took over. Sue, his training forgotten, screamed and opened fire. A brilliant bolt of plasma shot from his cannon and struck the grave Murph. Square in the center of its mass, the plasma bolt passed through it like light through glass. It hit a giant tree behind the creature, setting it ablaze. The grave Murph was untouched. The creature glided towards Sue. It was not fast, but it was relentless. Sue fired again and again, each shot useless. The heat from the plasma cannon began to warp the air. Sue, stop! It's not working, Hannah shouted, but it was too late. The grave Murph was upon him. A silvery pseudopod shaped like a blade lashed out. It did not cut Sue's cannon. It flowed over it. The advanced composite metal of the weapon dissolved into slurry, dripping to the ground. The power cell exploded with a small pop, throwing Sue backwards onto the jungle floor. The grave Murph loomed over him, its form beginning to descend. No! Myra screamed. She fired her own rifle, aiming at the creature's head. The shot was perfect and completely useless. Jin didn't fire. He was already moving. While the creature was focused on Sue, he sprinted. Not towards the creature, but away from it. He ran towards the cave. His lungs burned. Branches whipped at his face. He could hear Myra shouting his name, her voice filled with confusion and fear. Back at the camp, the situation was desperate. The grave Murph had turned its attention from Sue, who was scrambling backwards, to Myra and Hannah. Hannah was trying to get a distress call out, but her comms unit was filled with static. The creature's proximity was disrupting all their electronics. The lights on their damping beacons flickered and died. Their last defense was gone. The grave Murph flowed towards Myra. She stood her ground, firing shot after shot, a defiant look on her face even as tears of frustration streaked her cheeks. It was like trying to stop a flood with a bucket, high above, in a low orbit. Trainer Kale watched the live feed from the cadet's helmet cameras. The video was glitchy, breaking up with interference, but the audio was clear. He heard the panic, the useless weapons fire, Sue's cry of pain. Stupid, stubborn children, he muttered, his mandibles clenched. He opened the channel. Cadets. This is Trainer Kale. Disengage. Fall back now? That is a direct order. On the ground, Mara heard the command in her earpiece, crackling through the static. We can't. It has us cornered. Kale watched Jin's camera feed. It was a blur of motion, trees rushing by. The cadet was running away. A cold disappointment settled in Kale's chest. The human was fleeing, abandoning his team. Then Jin's camera feed stabilized. He was in a small cave. He was grabbing something large and bulky from under a tarp. It was a crude, homemade weapon, a mess of wires and a thick metal barrel. Kale's eyes widened in disbelief. Cadet Jin. What is that? What are you doing? Jin did not answer. He was loading a heavy, dark gray metal slug into the weapon's breech. The action was smooth, practiced. Cadet! Stand down. Kale's voice was a sharp crackle over the comms. That is a direct order. You are holding a useless piece of scrap. You will get yourself killed. On the video feed, Kale saw Jin's hands tighten on the stock of the ugly weapon. He saw the cadet turn and begin to run back towards the fight. Hefting the heavy device, Jin's voice came through the comms, calm and clear amidst the chaos. Someone has to try something new. Kale could only watch. His theories and his doctrine crumbling as a human cadet, armed with a primitive tool, ran straight towards a monster that could not be beaten. Jin ran. The crude weapon was incredibly heavy, slamming against his back with every step. He could hear the frantic sounds of the fight ahead. Myra's rifle firing, Hannah's shouts, and beneath it all, a strange, silent pressure that was the Gravemorph itself. He burst from the tree line back into the small clearing. The scene was one of devastation. Sue was on the ground, clutching his arm where his cannon had melted. Hannah was crouched over him, trying to pull him to safety. Myra was standing between them and the creature, her plasma rifle glowing red-hot from overuse. She was the only thing left between the Gravemorph and her friends. The creature was focused on her. It seemed almost curious, this small being who kept attacking it with useless light. A silvery tendril, sharp as a needle, shot out towards her chest. Jin didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He skidded to a stop, 20 meters from the creature. He swung the heavy railgun off his shoulder and planted his feet. The stock was rough against his shoulder. He flipped the switch to charge the magnets. The sound was nothing like the soft hum of a plasma weapon. It was a high-pitched, piercing whine that cut through the jungle air. It was the sound of raw power building, of electricity screaming through copper coils. The Gravemorph stopped. The needle-like tendril retracted. Its entire shimmering form rotated towards Jin. It had never heard a sound like that before. The high-frequency whine seemed to bother it, to confuse its senses. It rippled, its surface becoming unsettled. Trainer Kale's voice was a distant, crackling buzz in Jin's ear. "Cadet, stand down. You are disobeying a direct order." Jin ignored it. His world had narrowed to the front sight of his crude weapon and the silvery core of the creature. He could see it clearly now, a darker, more solid-looking area in the center of its flowing body. The flinch in the hologram had been right there. Myra stared, her rifle lowering. She saw the determination on Jin's face. She saw the ugly, makeshift weapon in his hands. It looked so primitive next to the advanced horror of the Gravemorph. But for the first time, the creature wasn't moving forward. It was just, watching Jin? Myra whispered, but her voice was lost in the whine of the railgun. The Gravemorph seemed to make a decision. This new thing, this strange sound, was a threat. It began to glide towards Jin, faster now. It left Myra behind, no longer interested in her. Jin held his ground. The whine reached its peak, a shriek that made the teeth ache. The power cell was almost drained. He had one shot. One chance. The creature was 10 meters away. 5. Jin took a deep breath and pulled the trigger. There was no beam of light. No explosion. There was only a sound, a single, brutal crack that was louder than anything the jungle had ever heard. It was the sound of air being ripped apart. The magnetic coils launched the solid tungsten slug faster than sound. It was invisible to the eye. One moment it was in the barrel. The next it had hit its target. The Gravemorph did not phase. The slug struck the darker core dead center. The impact was not like an energy weapon. It was a physical transfer of force. The creature did not dissipate. It did not absorb the blow. It stopped. Its entire form shuddered violently. The smooth, liquid surface jolted and splashed like a pond hit by a boulder. The shimmering light within it flickered wildly, going from bright silver to a dull gray and back again. For a single, incredible second, the creature became completely solid. Its form freezing in a shape of shock and pain. Then it let out a sensation. Not a sound, but a wave of distorted space-time that felt like a silent scream. It was a pulse of pure agony that made all their stomachs lurch and their heads spin. The Gravemorph recoiled. It flowed backwards away from Jin, its form collapsing in on itself. The solid core where the slug had hit was now a fractured, cloudy mess. It did not try to attack again. It did not try to phase. It simply retreated, seeping back into the ground from where it came, moving with a new, sluggish pain. In a moment, it was gone. The oppressive pressure in the air vanished with it. Silence returned to the jungle. It was a stunned, heavy silence, broken only by the sizzle of the overheating railgun in Jin's hands. Thin smoke rose from the exposed wiring. The weapon was spent, a one-time tool that had done its job. Jin slowly lowered the heavy barrel. his arms trembling from the recoil and the adrenaline. He looked at the spot where the creature had been. The ground was scorched from plasma fire, but there was no sign of the gravemurph. Only a small, deep hole in a tree trunk 20 meters behind where the creature had stood marked the path of his slug. Myra was the first to move. She ran to Sue and Hannah, helping them to their feet. Sue was staring at Jin, his mouth hanging open. Hannah looked from the empty space to Jin's weapon, her mind trying to process what she had just seen. Trainer Kale's voice was silent. The comms channel was dead quiet. Myra walked over to Jin. She looked at the crude railgun, then at his face. You heard it, she said, her voice full of awe. You actually heard it. Jin let the heavy weapon fall to the ground with a dull thud. He looked at his friends, safe and alive. He looked at the jungle, now just a jungle again. Not a hunting ground? It flinched, he said simply. He had proven his point. The trainer had said no weapon could halt it. But the trainer was wrong. They had just needed the right kind of weapon. The shuttle ride back to the academy ship was quiet. No one spoke. Sue sat with his bandaged arm, staring at the floor. Hannah was busy, but her eyes kept drifting to Jin, who sat calmly by the viewport. Myra stayed close to him, a silent show of support. When they landed, they were not greeted as returning cadets. They were met by a squad of stern-faced Viscar guards. Trainer Kale was there, his expression unreadable. Cadet Jin, Kale's voice clicked, sharp and formal. You will come with me. The rest of you report to the medical bay for evaluation. Jin stood up. He gave a small, reassuring nod to Myra before following Kale and the guards. They did not take him to a detention cell. They took him to a large, circular room, a debriefing chamber. A panel of high-ranking coalition officers sat at a curved table. Their species were varied, but their expressions were all the same, serious and intense. Jin stood alone in the center of the room. The lights were bright. Trainer Kale stood to the side. This is the cadet, he stated. An officer with fine, feathery tendrils instead of hair spoke first. Cadet Jin, you violated a direct order from your commanding officer in a live-fire situation. You used unauthorized, scavenged, and highly dangerous equipment. Explain yourself. Jin took a slow breath. He was not nervous. He was sure of what he had done. The order was to retreat, Jin said, his voice clear. But the gravemorph had blocked our path. Retreat was impossible. The damping fields failed. Our standard weapons were useless. We were about to die. Another officer, this one with thick, scaly skin, grunted. So you decided to build a... What was it? A magnetic railgun, sir, Jin said. It fires a solid metal projectile at high speed. A primitive kinetic weapon, the scaly officer said, sounding unimpressed. We have data. They do not work. With respect, sir, Jin said. Your data is wrong. A murmur went through the panel. No one spoke to the high command like that. Trainer Kale stepped forward. The cadet is correct. Everyone turned to look at him. Kale stood stiffly, his pride warring with his duty to report the facts. I watched the live feed, Kale continued, his voice hard. He is correct that the situation was hopeless. I also saw the result. The gravemorph was struck. It was injured. It retreated. The cadet single quotes S.doll achieved what our entire arsenal could not. The head of the panel, an elderly Viscar with faded gray plates, leaned forward. Show us. A large screen lit up on the wall. It played the video from Jin's helmet camera. The cadets watched the shaky, chaotic footage. They saw the gravemorph ignore the plasma fire. They saw it advance on Myra. They heard the strange whine of Jin's weapon. They saw the creature stop and turn. Then they saw it happen. The screen did not show the slug. It was too fast. But it clearly showed the gravemorph's reaction. The violent shudder. The flickering of its light. The way it solidified for a moment in clear distress. The silent scream that distorted the video feed itself. And then its pained, hurried retreat. The room was utterly silent when the video ended. The elderly Viscar officer stared at Jin. How did you know? Jin looked at the frozen image on the screen. I reviewed the training hologram, he explained. I saw a moment where a Gravemurph flinched. It was hit by a solid round from a destroyed mech's cannon. The flinch was small. Everyone else missed it, but I saw it. The creature reacted to physical impact. It could not phase fast enough, or perhaps the impact disrupted its ability to phase. I just thought, if a small bullet makes it flinch, what would a big one do? He looked at the panel of officers. You have been trying to use energy. You try to cut it or burn it. I thought maybe it was like trying to cut water with a knife. It does not work. But if you hit water with a hammer, you can still splash it. The simplicity of his words hung in the air. The most advanced military in the galaxy had been defeated because they overthought the problem. A human cadet had looked at it and proposed the most basic, physical solution. The head officer finally spoke. Cadet Jin, you broke regulations? You disobeyed a direct order. These are serious offenses. He paused, his ancient eyes studying Jin. However, you also saved the lives of your team. And you have provided the Galactic Coalition with its first viable combat strategy against a Gravemurph. Your actions, while insubordinate, have changed our entire understanding of this threat. He looked around the table. The other officers gave slight nods. The disciplinary report will note your violation, the officer said. But it will also be followed by a full pardon. More importantly, we are starting a new weapons development project immediately. Hyperkinetic and gravity anchor systems. We will build your hammer. He almost smiled. And we will need the person who thought of it. You and your team are hereby reassigned. You will be junior consultants on this project. Your practical experience is now a valuable resource. The debriefing was over. The officers stood and filed out, already talking and excited. Low tones about the new possibilities. Jin was left alone with Trainer Kale. Kale walked over to him. He was silent for a long time. You were right, Cadet, he said finally, the words seeming difficult for him. I was wrong. I was so focused on the doctrine I could not see past it. You saw what we all missed. He placed a hand on Jin's shoulder. It was a rare gesture for a Viskar. You did not just save your friends. You may have saved countless others. That is what matters. Later, Jin found Myra, Hana, and Sue in the common area. They had heard the news. Their shock had been replaced by a buzzing excitement. So we're not in trouble? Hana asked, her eyes wide. We're consultants. Sue said, a huge grin on his face. They want me to help design a bigger version of your gun. Myra smiled at Jin. You did it. You really did it. Jin looked at his friends. He thought about the long, fearful night in the jungle. He thought about the loud crack of the railgun and the creature's silent scream. They had given up, Jin said quietly. They accepted that they could not fight. But we did not. We are human. We do not like to be told something is impossible. He looked out the viewport at the stars. The galaxy was a big place, full of unknown threats. But now they had a new idea, a simple, powerful idea born from human stubbornness. When magic fails, when science is defeated, sometimes you just need a good, solid punch. And humanity, it turned out, was very good at throwing them.